Professor Ashwin Kumar, economist at the Institute for Public Policy Research. Ashwin, good afternoon to you. So let's give a grade then to the Chancellor. How did she do overall in that speech?
Well, it was good to see her being an activist about the economy. What you don't want is a chancellor sitting back and just hoping that growth happens. You want the government to be thinking actively about what it can do to support the economy, to support businesses, to make sure that we've got the infrastructure that we need. So I think in that sense, it was good to see her making a speech on growth, taking steps to support it. However, I do have a sort of slight concern that when we're thinking about the airport in Heathrow, we're thinking about infrastructure investment in only one part of the country.
Yep.
And actually, it's really important that we rebalance economic activity around the country, because that's one of the areas in which the UK does worse than many other countries. It's far too concentrated in London and the southeast, and that actually costs us. And so we do need to see more effort made for infrastructure, for investment spending outside of London and the southeast.
How quick can these things happen? You know, I think I live in probably the wrong... I think I should have been born in China sometimes, because those guys will whip up a runway in about half an hour if you ask them. And I don't know how they do it, and I don't know what they're made of. Paper mache maybe, but they seem to be able to do it. Whereas over here, someone says, yes, it's penciled in for 2056 or something. You think, well, why? I mean, there's obviously going to be environmental objections. There will be planning objections. There'll be all sorts of other parts. The Mayor of London will object, along with, you can see the campaigns happening now. But in theory, you know, growth is like turning around an oil tanker, isn't it?
So this one is a very complex project, and actually the boss of Heathrow Airport has said that they're hoping to have got their planning permission by 2030. So building will only start after that. So I think one of the questions is that when you put all of the money that's going to be spent on this airport against perhaps things that could deliver in more of a short term, you know, bus services, rail improvements in other parts of the country, could that have made more of a contribution to growth in the short term? Yeah. Nevertheless, I do think the government has to take long-term decisions. You can't, just because something won't produce a return for a long time,
True.
You can't just say we're not going to bother to look at it. Otherwise, you know, you get to a few years' time and you haven't taken the decisions you need.
It's interesting that the government have made, you know, in housing and other areas, lots about, you know, crazy planning regulations getting in the way, and yet it's going to take 5 years to get planning permission for a runway, for goodness sake. You know, you have to sort of scratch your head and think, you know, would Trump's America withstand a 5-year powwow while people got together to work out whether they could or couldn't build something?
I mean, some of that time will actually be actually getting detailed plans to put in as a proposal. So it will be the airport's time to prepare their plans and make them really concrete and precise. But yeah, these things do take a long time. And I think it's one of the questions about you know, we need to see growth in other parts of the country. We need to see it quicker. And there are some schemes that can deliver quicker. Would urban transport, for instance, in cities outside London have a bigger impact on growth more quickly?
Yeah. It seems that Rachel Reeves has a love affair with the letter R. If it's not runways, it's reservoirs. That's another area, of course, that's been, you know, we've talked about it many times over the years. It's been lacking. There's been a problem, but it will perhaps mean more reservoirs to get those things built. They're pretty big old beasts, also require lots of planning permission too. We could be looking at higher bills there as well.
Well, look, it's the right thing to do, though. I mean, these things take a long time to build, but if you're not identifying what we're going to need over the next decades, then you're suddenly going to be left short of infrastructure. And I think one of the problems we've had for the last 15 years has been that the government has cut investment spending, and many of these decisions haven't been taken. So I think this is what's to be welcomed, is that she is looking to the future. She's putting in place the plans. OK, they may take longer than we think, but at least the plans are happening, and some of this investment will take place.
A lot of this, surely, Ashwin, is about creating the mood music, right? It's setting a tone, a direction of travel. You know, we're a government that's about growth. We're about the future, as you just said. You know, we're about being open for business.
I think that's right. And I think it's worth just reflecting on the timing of the budget. We had the budget on the 30th of October. And in that budget, we had two separate things announced. One was we had obviously the taxation, the employers' national insurance contributions. But the other thing is we had quite a lot of spending on public services announced. Now, neither of those are going to kick in until the 6th of April, the new financial year. but it's a lot easier for businesses to identify what they're going to have to pay. But they're also going to see some benefits from the higher public expenditure because, people are going to have more wages in their pockets where they're being paid to work on various investment projects. Staff who hadn't had a pay rise in public services will be getting a bit more of a pay rise. So all of that will be a benefit to businesses. But it's quite understandable that businesses see the negative a bit more clearly than they see the positive.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation where people are being more negative about the budget and not quite being balanced. And so I think it's a good thing that picture is being rebalanced and the focus on what the money can be spent on and the growth it can produce is returning to the conversation.
But is the credibility of the government compromised on this? Because, a lot of people would go, well, why didn't she say all of this stuff in the budget, or at least sound as if this was the direction of travel? She obviously can't make all of those announcements. We get that. But, you've now got this huge hullabaloo going on in the cabinet because the third runway thing in particular, that's going to divide the room. We know that Ed Miliband is, at the moment sitting crying in the corner of a room in his office because he can't quite believe what has happened. So it's about trust, isn't it? And governments and confidence and all of those things go together. For an economy to grow, you need to have, or you certainly need the perception, if nothing else, that what you have is a credible team and a credible plan.
You're right. You do need that credibility, and the reality is it takes time to come to pass. You don't earn that credibility instantly. The previous government, we had the Liz Truss budget, we had interest rates shooting up, and then we had a bit of a sense that the Conservatives were expecting to lose the next election, the following election, and so they were scrabbling around for anything that might give them some popularity and improve their fortunes at the polls.
Yep.
And so that created a sense that economic policy was all about short-termism. I think we've got a government with a stable majority. Sometimes we have to hold our nerve. It would have been, the government can't announce everything on one day, and bit by bit, some of these measures which they've promised and they've signalled will actually start to be announced and then actually start to be delivered.
Just finally, Ashwin, was there one thing there you were hoping to hear the Chancellor say? Was there a big announcement that you thought, if only she'd have said that, we'd have really been in business?
So I think it's about the transport investment to connect up the major cities of the north of England. When we compare ourselves to other countries in Europe, for instance, the cities outside the main city do a lot better than our cities outside the main city. And so one of the things that we have to do is to create a situation where if you live in Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, York, you can travel very quickly between them, and that you can create the economies of scale and create better, bigger businesses. So I'd like to see more investment in that transport, that band across the north of England, and that would really help to drive growth.
Yeah, indeed. Ashwin, thanks for your time. Really appreciate that. Professor Ashwin Kumar, the economist at the Institute for Public Policy Research.